I always believed my parents wanted the best for me. Sure, they were controlling, but I thought it came from love. Then whispers from a neighbor and a strange realtor flyer in my mailbox made my stomach twist. Could my parents actually be trying to sell my house behind my back? The thought felt impossible, insane even, until I pulled the deed from the county office. What I discovered made my hands shake so violently I could barely hold the paper. Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm a 29-year-old man, and I work as a software developer in Seattle. I don't live a flashy life. My days are mostly lines of code, quiet evenings, and the occasional beer with coworkers. I've always been more comfortable with machines than people. Maybe that's why my grandfather loved me so much. He was a man who built things with his hands, and I was a man who built things with my mind. Two different eras, but the same stubborn obsession with making things work. The house I live in now is the only place I've ever truly called home. My grandfather built it himself, board by board, back in the late 1950s. A modest two-story, white siding that's now yellowed with time, and a front porch that creaks with every step. The floors are uneven, the wiring is old, and the plumbing rattles like bones in the winter. But it's mine, or at least, it was supposed to be. When my grandfather passed, he left a will. Everyone expected him to leave the house to my mom, his only daughter. But when the lawyer read it, the words cut through the air like glass. I leave my house, at 1437 Pinecrest Avenue, to my grandson, Daniel Thomas. Me. I'll never forget the look on my mother's face. She tried to hide it, but her lips pressed so tight I thought she might draw blood. My father looked stunned, my siblings looked furious, and me? I just sat there, numb, because I hadn't expected it either. After the reading, Mom pulled me aside. Daniel, this doesn't make sense. He was old, confused. He didn't mean this. But I knew he did. I spent every weekend of my teenage years at that house, sanding wood, painting walls, fixing old pipes. Grandpa didn't see me as the awkward quiet kid my parents ignored. He saw me as someone capable, someone who cared about what he built. He told me once, sitting on the porch with his coffee, "This house will be yours someday. I don't trust anyone else to keep it standing." So when the will confirmed his words, I wasn't shocked. But my parents? They never forgave me for it. At first, it was little things. Passive-aggressive comments. My dad muttering about how expensive the upkeep was. My mom saying I was wasting my time in a house I couldn't afford. My younger brother, Jason, asking why Grandpa hadn't left it to him since he was better with money. I brushed it off. I thought grief made people bitter. I thought time would heal it. But then the strange things started happening. One day, I came home from work and found a glossy flyer tucked under my doormat. It was from a realtor, advertising cash offers for old homes in the neighborhood. I didn't think much of it, until I realized the flyer had my address handwritten at the top. Another day, a man in a pressed suit stood outside my fence, snapping photos. When I asked him what he was doing, he said he was just surveying the area. But his clipboard had a printout of my house on it. The final straw came when I pulled into my driveway one evening and saw my father standing on the porch with a stranger. They shook hands quickly, and the man walked off with a folder tucked under his arm. When I asked Dad what he was doing there, he brushed me off. "Just stopping by to check on the place. You should be more grateful, Daniel. Houses like this don't last forever." Something was wrong. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe my parents were just bitter, not actively scheming. But then, over coffee one Saturday morning, my neighbor leaned across the fence and asked casually, "So, when are you moving out? I heard your parents are putting the place on the market." My heart stopped. I forced a laugh. "What are you talking about?" He frowned. "The realtor who came by last week said your folks were thinking of selling. I figured you'd be moving somewhere nicer. You know, out of this old place." I couldn't breathe. It was one thing to feel like my parents resented me having the house. It was another to hear from a stranger that they were already trying to sell it. That night, I lay awake in my creaking old bedroom, staring at the cracked ceiling. My parents were planning something behind my back. And if I didn't get proof, they'd rip the last thing my grandfather gave me right out of my hands. That's when I decided, I'd pull the deed. I needed to see, with my own eyes, that the house was still mine. I needed to make sure my parents hadn't already done something irreversible. And when I finally walked into the county records office and asked for the deed to 1437 Pinecrest Avenue, what I found made my hands shake so violently, I almost dropped the paper. I remember gripping the paper so tightly in that stale government office that the edges dug into my palms. The deed was supposed to have my name on it, clean and clear. Daniel Thomas, sole owner. That's what I expected to see. That's what my grandfather promised me when he signed his will. But the line where my name should have stood proud was no longer mine alone. Next to it, in sharp black ink, were two other names, Richard Thomas and Elaine Thomas. My parents. My stomach dropped. For a moment, the air felt too heavy to breathe. The clerk behind the counter must have seen my face drain of color because she leaned forward, voice cautious. Is something wrong? I forced my lips into something like a smile. No. No, I just wasn't expecting to see that. I folded the paper quickly, sliding it into my bag as if hiding it could erase what I'd seen. My parents had somehow put themselves on the deed. That meant they could legally sell my house. My house. Driving home, my mind spiraled. How had they done it? Forgery? Some loophole in the will? Did they pressure the lawyer? Did they go behind my back to the county office? Every scenario made my chest burn hotter. The betrayal wasn't subtle anymore, it was screaming at me from the paper in my bag. And suddenly, all those little signs I'd brushed off started snapping into place like puzzle pieces. The realtor flyers. The man taking photos. My father shaking hands on my porch. The neighbor casually mentioning the sale. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't imagination. It was all real. They were planning to sell the house. They were planning to take from me the last piece of my grandfather that I had left. I wanted to storm over to their place that night, shove the paper in their faces, and scream, "What the hell is this?" But I stopped myself. I needed to think. If they were capable of this, if they were capable of betraying me at this level, I couldn't afford to play recklessly. So instead, I started watching. The next few weeks, I paid closer attention to every interaction with them. And the signs of betrayal became impossible to ignore. My mom started asking strangely specific questions. "Do you think you'll be staying in that old house long term?" She'd ask with fake casualness, stirring her tea like it wasn't a knife to the gut. "Wouldn't you prefer a condo downtown? Closer to work?" My dad dropped little comments, too. "You know, it's a seller's market right now. Houses like yours don't stay on the block long. If I were you, I'd cash out while the price is high." Even Jason, my younger brother, started circling like a vulture. One night at dinner, he leaned back in his chair and smirked. "So, when mom and dad finally sell that place, are you at least getting a cut? Or are you just gonna sit there and pout like a little kid?" I wanted to leap across the table and strangle him. Instead, I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth might crack. The house had become a silent battlefield. Every conversation felt loaded, every glance from them a challenge. I couldn't tell if they thought I didn't know or if they just didn't care. Maybe they believed I was too weak, too naive to fight back. Maybe they thought they'd gaslight me into surrender. But if there's one thing I inherited from my grandfather, it's his stubbornness. He once spent 6 months fighting the city over a zoning ordinance just because they told him to move his fence 3 feet. He didn't back down. He never backed down. And neither would I. The question was, how far would I have to go to stop them? Because the more I watched my parents, the more I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just greed. This was strategy. They were moving pieces into place, setting up their attack slowly, carefully, like predators circling prey. And I was the prey. Seattle is a city that thrives on whispers. Neighbors don't confront you outright, they exchange information like currency, quietly, through hushed conversations over hedges and casual remarks while walking their dogs. My neighborhood was no different. People noticed things. People talked. And when it came to my parents, the whispers started circling back to me. It began with Mrs. Callahan, the older widow across the street. She caught me one evening as I was hauling groceries from my car. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes carried that pitying look I'd come to despise. "Daniel, honey," she said, "I just want you to know. If you have to leave, we'll all miss you. This neighborhood won't be the same without you." I froze. The bag of groceries slipped from my arms, an apple rolling across the pavement. "Leave? What do you mean?" She tilted her head. "Oh. I just assumed. Your parents were talking to that realtor again today. He was parked outside for a good half hour. They said they were thinking of putting the house on the market. I'm so sorry if I wasn't supposed to say anything." Her words hit me like a gut punch. My parents weren't even hiding their betrayal anymore. They were making plans right out in the open, confident that I was too stupid, or too blind, to notice. A few days later, I overheard another conversation. 2 neighbors chatting by the fence, their voices low but not low enough. "It's such a shame," one of them whispered. "That house has been in the family forever, and now they're selling it out from under him." Greedy, the other replied. But what can you do? Blood is blood. Blood is blood. The phrase stuck in my head like poison. If blood meant anything, wouldn't my parents want me to keep the house? Wouldn't they honor Grandpa's will? Instead, they treated me like an obstacle. The whispers kept coming. Each one was another confirmation that my parents weren't just thinking about selling, they were actively planning it. And the neighborhood knew before I did. The humiliation burned deep in my chest. Everyone saw me as the pathetic son too weak to defend what was his. I started noticing their movements more carefully. Realtors pulling up in shiny cars. Strangers standing at the curb, pointing at my house. My parents walking through the yard when they thought I wasn't home, gesturing at the porch, the garden, the roof. They weren't just thinking about it. They were already selling it, piece by piece, in conversations I wasn't invited to. The betrayal became impossible to ignore when I found an envelope slipped under my front door. No return address. Inside was a glossy brochure from a realtor's office downtown. Scribbled across the front in rushed handwriting, "Your parents are selling. Protect yourself." My hands shook as I read it over and over. Who sent it? A realtor with a conscience? A neighbor who pitied me? Whoever it was, the message was clear. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't overreacting. My parents were planning to strip me of everything my grandfather left me. That night, sitting alone in the dark living room, I felt rage simmering so hot it scared me. My parents had always been controlling, but this was theft. This was betrayal carved into my skin like a brand. And for the first time in my life, I realized something dangerous about myself. I wasn't just capable of fighting back. I wanted to. The whispers had lit a fire inside me. They thought they were clever. They thought they were winning. But they didn't know that I was already preparing to turn every whisper into a weapon. The man showed up on a Wednesday afternoon, right when I was getting home from work. He didn't expect me to be there. I could tell by the way his face twitched when he saw me pulling into the driveway. He was tall, thin, wearing a tailored suit that screamed downtown money. Clipboard in hand, phone tucked to his ear. I killed the engine and sat there in my car for a second, watching him snap photos of my porch like it already belonged to someone else. Rage rolled through me in a wave. I got out, slammed the car door, and walked straight up to him. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice flat but laced with venom. He froze for half a beat, then forced a polite smile. "Oh. Sorry, I'm just surveying the area. Lovely property you've got here." "Surveying?" I repeated, stepping closer. "Funny, because you're taking photos of my house. Who are you with?" He shifted uncomfortably, tucking the clipboard against his side like he didn't want me to see it. "Just a local realtor. Helping out some clients. Nothing to worry about." I narrowed my eyes. "Clients? What clients?" That's when he made the mistake. He tried to cover too quickly. "Oh, your parents. We've been in contact about listing the property. Shouldn't be long before." He stopped mid-sentence, realizing what he'd just admitted. His smile faltered. "I mean, maybe I shouldn't have." But it was too late. My blood went cold, then hot, all in the same second. "My parents," I said slowly, my voice shaking with fury, "don't own this house." "I do." His mouth opened, then closed again like a fish gasping for air. He stammered, I was told, look, maybe there's been some confusion." "Confusion?" I stepped forward, forcing him back toward the curb. "You're telling me my parents are trying to sell my house behind my back? Is that the confusion you're talking about?" He raised his hands like I was holding him at gunpoint. "Sir, please, I didn't mean to cause trouble. I thought it was a family arrangement. They said it was being handled." The words "being handled" rattled in my skull. My parents weren't just scheming, they were orchestrating a full-blown sale. I shoved my hands into my pockets to keep from shaking. My voice dropped to a low growl. "If you step foot on this property again without my permission, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. And if I see one more goddamn brochure with my address on it, I'll sue your firm so hard you'll be selling used cars by next year. Do I make myself clear?" His fake confidence melted instantly. "Crystal. Absolutely. Won't happen again." He backed away, fumbling for his phone like it was a lifeline. I stood there, fists clenched, watching him retreat to his sleek black BMW. The car purred as he pulled away, but all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. For the first time, I had confirmation. Hard proof. My parents weren't just bitter, they were actively selling my house behind my back. They'd lied. Manipulated. Forged themselves onto the deed. And now they were working with realtors to erase me from the picture entirely. When I went inside, I collapsed onto the couch, heart pounding so hard it hurt. My hands trembled as I pulled the folded deed from my bag. Their names stared back at me, black ink like a curse. I whispered out loud, to no one, "They're trying to erase me." And that was when I knew, this wasn't just about saving the house anymore. This was war. They thought they were clever, pulling strings in the shadows. But shadows have a way of hiding snakes. And now, I was ready to strike. The night after confronting the realtor, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the cracked ceiling, my mind looping the same thought: how did they get on the deed? The will had been clear. The house was mine. My name, no one else's. But the paper I pulled at the county office had all three names: mine, my father's, my mother's. That meant at some point, after my grandfather's death, they'd managed to insert themselves legally. Which meant paperwork. Which meant a trail. And if there was a trail, I was damn well going to follow it. The next morning, I took a sick day from work. I drove back to the county clerk's office, the fluorescent lights buzzing above me like a hive. I approached the counter, my voice steady but low. "I need to see every filing related to 1437 Pinecrest Avenue, all of them. Since the transfer from Harold Thomas to Daniel Thomas." The clerk gave me a look like I was being a pain, but rules were rules. 10 minutes later, a thick manila folder hit the counter with a thud. I carried it to one of those uncomfortable metal tables and sat down, my pulse pounding in my temples. Page after page, I flipped through official documents. Death certificates. Transfer forms. Property tax statements. For a while, it all looked normal. And then I found it. A single sheet of paper, dated 6 months after my grandfather's funeral. A quitclaim deed, signed by, supposedly, me. It claimed that I had voluntarily added my parents to the title of the house, giving them equal ownership. I stared at the signature at the bottom. My name. Daniel Thomas. Except, it wasn't mine. The loops of the letters were sloppy, rushed. The T in Thomas was wrong, it didn't have the sharp crossbar I'd used since high school. My parents had forged my signature. My vision blurred with rage. They hadn't just schemed. They hadn't just manipulated. They'd committed fraud. Cold, calculated fraud to steal from their own son. I flipped through the next few pages, bile rising in my throat. Attached to the form was a notarization stamp. The name of the notary jumped out at me: Edward Kane. I knew that name. He was an old friend of my father's. A drinking buddy, the kind of man who'd look the other way for a few $100. My stomach turned as it all clicked into place. My parents had roped him into notarizing a forged signature, making the whole thing look legitimate. I slammed the folder shut, my chest heaving. They'd gone further than I'd ever imagined. They hadn't just stolen my house, they'd erased my autonomy. They'd written me out of my own story. And yet, in their arrogance, they'd left a crack in their armor. The forged signature was sloppy. The notary was biased, and I had the original will from my grandfather, which explicitly left the house to me. I realized something in that moment: this wasn't hopeless. This wasn't over. If I played this right, I could prove everything. But first, I had to keep playing dumb. If my parents suspected that I knew about the forgery, they'd cover their tracks. Destroy evidence. Maybe even move faster to finalize the sale. So I put the folder back together, handed it to the clerk, and walked out with my face calm, my step steady. But inside, a storm was brewing. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the deed spread out in front of me. I opened my laptop and started scanning. Screenshot after screenshot. Every signature, every date, every suspicious discrepancy. I created folders. Timelines. I was building a case. But anger doesn't wait quietly. As I worked, I caught myself whispering under my breath, "You thought you could erase me. You thought I'd roll over." I clenched my fists. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Because if they wanted war, I was ready to give them hell. The evidence sat in neat digital folders on my laptop, but no matter how organized it was, my life still felt like it was spinning out of control. Fraud. Forgery. Betrayal by the two people who were supposed to protect me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their names on that deed, black ink branding itself into my skull. I couldn't carry it alone anymore. I needed to confront them. So I planned it carefully. No screaming phone calls. No rash accusations. I waited until Sunday dinner, the weekly ritual my parents insisted on. We always sat around the same oak table in their dining room, pretending to be a normal family. That night, the roast chicken smelled like ashes to me. I barely touched my plate. My brother Jason cracked jokes, my dad laughed too loudly, my mom fussed with the salt shaker. But all I could hear was the pounding of my heart. Finally, I set down my fork. My voice was calm, too calm. "So," I said, "I went to the county records office last week." The room froze. My mom's hand paused midair, the serving spoon dripping gravy onto the tablecloth. My dad's laughter cut off like a guillotine. Jason raised an eyebrow. "I pulled the deed," I continued. I slid a folded copy from my jacket pocket and placed it in the center of the table. The paper landed with a soft thud that felt louder than a gunshot. For a moment, no one moved. Then my father leaned forward, scanning the page with a mask of feigned confusion. "What's this?" "You tell me," I said flatly. "Because unless I've developed amnesia, I don't remember signing away my house to you too." My mom's lips parted, her face flushing crimson. "Daniel, sweetheart, you must be mistaken. We don't." My voice cracked like a whip. "Don't you dare lie to me. That's not my signature. You forged it. And you got Edward Kane to notarize it." The color drained from her face. My dad slammed a fist on the table, rattling the silverware. "Watch your mouth. You're accusing us of a felony." I leaned in, meeting his glare with one of my own. "I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm stating a fact. And I've got the proof. Screenshots. Dates. Comparisons. Grandpa's original will. Everything." Jason chuckled, trying to diffuse the tension. "Jesus, Dan, you're being dramatic. It's just a house." My head snapped toward him. "Just a house? It's Grandpa's legacy. And it's mine. You all knew that, but you decided to steal it anyway." The room fell into suffocating silence. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's eyes glistened, though whether from guilt or rage, I couldn't tell. Finally, she whispered, "You don't understand, Daniel. You can't handle this house, the taxes, the upkeep, it's too much for you. We're just trying to do what's best." I laughed bitterly. "What's best? For me, or for your bank account?" Neither of them answered. The silence was louder than any confession. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping against the floor. My voice shook with rage, but every word was deliberate. "You tried to erase me. But I see you now. And I swear, you won't get away with it." Their faces blurred as I stormed out, my vision hot with tears I refused to let fall. My hands were trembling as I gripped the steering wheel of my car, but one thought burned clear in my mind. They'd broken me. And now, I was going to break them. I thought storming out of that first confrontation would have cooled me down, but the truth was the opposite. My rage didn't fade, it grew. For 2 nights I didn't sleep. I paced my creaking floors, rereading the will, staring at the forgery, replaying their faces as I laid the evidence on the table. By the 3rd night, I couldn't stand it anymore. I needed answers. Real answers. Not the half-baked lies they'd fed me with trembling voices. So I drove back to my parents' house. It was late, close to 10 p.m., but their lights were still on. I didn't knock. I didn't wait. I walked straight inside like the place was mine, because for 29 years, they'd treated me like I didn't belong anywhere. They were at the dining room table again, paperwork spread out between them. My stomach turned when I saw the words listing agreement at the top of one of the forms. They froze when they saw me. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, my voice raw. I snatched the paper off the table before they could hide it. My eyes skimmed the lines, realtor's name, asking price, signatures. Their signatures. Not mine. "You were really going to do it," I said, my voice breaking. "You were going to sell my house behind my back." "Daniel," my mother began, her voice high-pitched, brittle. "Don't," I snapped. "Don't even try. You lied to my face. You forged my name. And now you're sitting here finalizing the sale like I don't even exist." My father stood, his face red with anger. "You ungrateful little shit. That house isn't yours. It belongs to this family." "It was this family's," I shot back. "Grandpa left it to me. Because he trusted me. Because he knew you'd pull something like this." Jason strolled in from the kitchen, a beer in hand, smirking like this was a sitcom. Here we go again. Dan the martyr, crying about the big bad parent stealing his toy. Something inside me snapped. I slammed the listing agreement down on the table, the paper crumpling under my fist. "This isn't a toy. This is my home. My legacy. And you're all vultures picking it apart like it's already a corpse." The room went silent. My father's jaw clenched. My mother's eyes brimmed with tears, but I could see it wasn't sorrow, It was rage at being caught. Jason just sipped his beer, like he was watching the world's most entertaining show. Finally, my father spoke. His voice was cold, calculated. You think you're smart, Daniel. You think you've got it all figured out. But you don't understand how the world works. That house is worth $500,000. Do you have the money to maintain it? To pay the taxes? To keep it standing? No, you're a kid playing house, and we're the adults cleaning up the mess. I leaned forward, my voice a low snarl. No. You're thieves. And the only mess here is the one you made when you signed my name without my permission. My mom's mask cracked then. Her voice rose, shrill, desperate. We did what we had to do. You don't know what it's like trying to hold this family together. You don't know what we've sacrificed. You sit in that house like some king, while we struggle. You think it's fair he gave it to you and not us? I stared at her, stunned. Fair? You think Grandpa didn't know what he was doing? He chose me. And you're spitting on his choice. On his memory. She looked away. My father didn't. His eyes bored into me, steel cold. You can scream all you want, Daniel. But at the end of the day, that deed has our names on it. Which means you can't stop us. I felt the blood drain from my face. His voice was final, full of confidence, like he'd already won. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I already had a plan. I straightened, pushing the crushed agreement back across the table. My voice was calm again, steady. You're right. That deed has your names on it. For now. But I'll find a way to take them off. And when I do, you'll regret ever trying to erase me. I turned and walked out, their stunned silence following me into the night. My hands were shaking, but my resolve had never been clearer. They thought they had power. But they had no idea what I was capable of when pushed into a corner. The war had begun. After that night, my parents didn't confront me directly. Instead, they did what they'd always done best, they spun lies. Whispered stories, half-truths, little manipulations meant to make me look unstable and ungrateful. It started with family. My aunt called me one afternoon, her voice sharp. Daniel, what's this I'm hearing about you accusing your parents of fraud? They've sacrificed everything for you, and this is how you repay them? I almost dropped the phone. What did they tell you? They said you're paranoid, she snapped. That you think they're trying to steal your house. Do you know how insane that sounds? They said you're having. What did your mother call it? A breakdown. A breakdown. That word cut deep. My mom had always weaponized it when I disagreed with her. Daniel's too emotional. Daniel overreacts. Now she was painting me as unstable to the entire family. The next day, I ran into Jason at a coffee shop. He smirked, loud enough for the barista to hear. Careful, everyone. My brother thinks the whole world is out to steal his little dollhouse. He's one forged signature away from a padded cell. Laughter from strangers cut me like glass. But it didn't stop there. The whispers seeped into the neighborhood. Mrs. Callahan avoided me now, eyes darting away whenever I waved. A coworker at the office pulled me aside. Hey, man, everything okay at home? Someone told me you're going through something with your family. I realized then that my parents weren't just trying to steal my house. They were trying to destroy my credibility. To isolate me. To make sure that when the hammer finally came down, nobody would believe me. The cruelty of it made me sick. These were the people who raised me, who were supposed to protect me. And now they were painting me as insane so they could line their pockets with the profit from selling my home. I wanted to scream. To confront them again. But I forced myself to hold back. I knew better now. Every time I lashed out, they twisted it into proof that I was unstable. So I played their game. Outwardly, I went quiet. I stopped arguing. I let them believe their lies were working. I let them believe I was beaten down. But inside, I was planning. Every fake tear my mother shed, every smirk my father wore, every sneer Jason threw my way, all of it fueled me. Because I wasn't going to stop at saving my house. I was going to burn their lies to the ground. And when I was done, everyone, family, neighbors, coworkers, would see the truth. They thought they were writing the story. But I was the one holding the pen. They thought they had me cornered. My parents strutted through the neighborhood with smug smiles, spinning stories about their ungrateful son who was too unstable to handle responsibility. Jason mocked me at every chance, telling anyone who'd listen that I was obsessed with a rotting shack I couldn't afford to keep. But while they laughed, I was building my war chest. It started with the forgery. I spent hours scanning every document from the county clerk's office, comparing my real signature against the fake. I contacted a handwriting analyst online, sending them both samples under the guise of research. Their reply was damning: the signatures do not match. The alleged Daniel Thomas signature is likely forged. Checkmate number 1. Next, I targeted the notary, Edward Kane, my father's old drinking buddy. I knew he was the weak link. A man who signed off on a fraudulent document could crumble under pressure. So I called him. I kept my voice calm, polite even. Mr. Kane, this is Daniel Thomas. I have some questions about a deed you notarized for my parents. There was a pause on the line, then a nervous chuckle. Oh, yes, I remember that. Just a family matter, right? Interesting, I said, recording every word on my phone. Because the signature on that document isn't mine. Which means you notarized a forgery. Dead silence.
I don't know what you're implying, he stammered.
I'm not implying anything, I said smoothly. I'm stating a fact. Now, here's the deal: you can either admit you were pressured into it, or I can forward this recording to the state licensing board and let them handle it. His breathing quickened. Daniel, please, your father, he said it was fine, he said you agreed. Got him. Another piece of evidence locked away. But I didn't stop there. I started digging into my parents' finances. Public records are a treasure trove if you know where to look. And what I found made my stomach twist with both disgust and excitement. My parents were drowning in debt. Credit cards maxed out. A second mortgage on their house. Quiet little payday loans stacking up interest like termites in the walls. That was the motive. They weren't selling my house because they thought I couldn't handle it. They were selling it to bail themselves out. Perfect. With every piece of evidence, I built a digital arsenal: forged signatures, recorded calls, financial records. But evidence wasn't enough. I needed witnesses. So I turned to the one group my parents had underestimated: the neighbors. I started asking questions, gently. Hey, have you noticed realtors stopping by my house? Did my parents ever mention selling the place to you? The responses piled up. Mrs. Callahan remembered them bragging about finally cashing in. The couple next door admitted they were asked to keep an eye on my property because it wouldn't be mine for long. Every whisper became a statement. Every statement became a weapon. Finally, I reached out to a lawyer. A sharp, no-nonsense woman named Rebecca who specialized in property disputes. I handed her everything. She flipped through the files, her expression growing darker with every page. Daniel, she said finally, this isn't just fraud. This is criminal. Forgery, conspiracy, maybe even elder exploitation if your grandfather's will is involved. If we take this to court, your parents won't just lose the house, they could lose everything. Her words were gasoline on the fire burning inside me. For weeks, I'd been painted as paranoid, unstable, ungrateful. But soon, I'd expose the truth. And when I did, there'd be no coming back for them. No reputation to salvage. No lies to hide behind. Because I wasn't just going to save my house. I was going to make sure the world saw my parents for what they really were: liars, thieves, and frauds. And Jason? He'd be dragged down with them. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for the perfect moment to spring it. The night before everything went down, I sat on my porch in the dark, listening to the old house creak in the wind. My grandfather's house. My house. I ran my hand over the wooden railing he'd built decades ago and whispered, "Tomorrow, I'll make this right." The next morning, I walked into my parents' house with Rebecca, my lawyer, at my side. My parents were already seated at the dining table, smug, self-satisfied, Jason lounging with that familiar smirk plastered across his face. They thought they'd already won. I dropped a thick binder of documents on the table with a satisfying thud. "We need to talk." My dad rolled his eyes. "More tantrums, Daniel?" Rebecca cut in before I could speak. Her voice was sharp as glass. "This isn't a tantrum. This is a legal matter. Mr. and Mrs. Thomas, you are guilty of forgery, fraud, and conspiracy to illegally transfer property ownership. And I have everything I need to prove it." Their faces drained of color. My mother's hands trembled on the table. Jason laughed, but it was forced this time. "She's bluffing." I opened the binder and slid a page across the table. Side-by-side signatures, mine versus the forged one. Highlighted notes from a handwriting analyst. "Not even close," I said softly. Next, the transcript of my recorded phone call with Edward Kane. His voice echoed through Rebecca's phone speaker, admitting he'd notarized the forged signature under pressure. My parents froze. Rebecca didn't stop. She laid out financial records, their debts, their mortgages, their loans. "This is your motive," she said coldly. You attempted to sell your son's house to cover your own financial mismanagement. A jury will eat this alive. My father's composure shattered. He slammed his fists on the table, but his voice cracked with desperation. This is family business. You can't drag us into court. Rebecca leaned in, her eyes like daggers. Watch me. I looked at my mother then. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with horror. For the first time, she didn't look like the manipulative woman who spun lies, she looked like a cornered animal. Daniel, please, she whispered. We're your parents. My chest tightened, but only for a second. Then I remembered every lie, every sneer, every night I spent doubting my own sanity because of them. I stood tall. You stopped being my parents the second you forged my name. Jason finally snapped, throwing his beer can into the sink. This is bullshit. Nobody's going to believe you. I pulled out my last card, a folder of sworn neighbor statements. Mrs. Callahan. The couple next door. All confirming they'd heard my parents planning to sell the house behind my back. Rebecca smiled thinly. Oh, they'll believe him. They already do. The silence that followed was suffocating. My parents looked shattered, Jason furious. I felt something I hadn't in months, control. Rebecca gathered the papers back into the binder. Here's what's going to happen. You will sign a corrective deed removing your names from the title immediately. If you refuse, we file suit tomorrow, civil and criminal. And trust me, the DA will salivate over a case this clear. My father's jaw clenched, but his hands shook as he signed. My mother cried silently beside him. Jason stormed out, muttering curses. And just like that, it was over. The moment their signatures hit that corrective deed, the house was mine again. Legally, indisputably, irrevocably. My grandfather's will, finally honored. But the victory wasn't just the house. It was the fallout. Word spread fast. The same whispers they'd used against me now turned on them. Neighbors saw them for what they really were. Family cut ties. Even Jason stopped showing up to dinners, too humiliated to face anyone. And me? I sat on my porch that night, the corrected deed in my hands. For the first time in months, I breathed without a weight on my chest. I looked at the house, old and creaking, but strong. My grandfather's legacy. My legacy. They tried to erase me. But in the end, I erased them. And it felt damn good.